I was asked to shed a bit of light from an Islamic perspective on the topic. If you look at the classical text, it talks about orphans, and it also talks about looking after people, what's called a kafil, somebody who looks and protects and provides for today. If we start with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the things that will strike you about him was that he was an adoptive parent. He actually adopted a person called Zayd, and this Zayd, this is before Islam, he actually adopted him. And what happened was he gave him his own name. He said Zayd ibn Muhammad. He was called Zayd, the son of Muhammad. And in the Quran, what happens is there's an injunction to change this, and the injunction is that he can't claim that he's his son, but like a blood son. And so then his name gets changed from Zayd bin Muhammad to Zayd bin Haritha, to his father's name Haritha, and so he becomes Zayd ibn Haritha. So the Prophet ﷺ actually was an adoptive parent himself. The other thing was he was also an orphan. So as we know from the Prophet ﷺ's life, his mother was still pregnant when his father passed away, and he was 6 years old when she passed away. And at the age of 6, he then gets transferred, his looking after gets transferred to his grandfather Abdul Muttalib until he's 8, and then he passes away. And at the age of 8, he then becomes under the guardianship and protection of his uncle Abu Talib until he becomes an adult. So the Prophet ﷺ went through those experiences himself, and therefore he was always very affectionate towards orphans. He had a very soft place for them in his heart. And so it's no surprise when we look at hadith, the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, that he enjoined us towards being good to orphans. So you all probably know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he said, Ana wa kafilul yatim fil jannah hakada. And he put up his two fingers. He said, myself and whoever looks after an orphan will be like this in paradise. Obviously, it's like, who wouldn't want to be with the Prophet ﷺ in paradise? So it's an easy way to get to paradise. And scholars say, well, what's the connection here? The connection is that the Prophet ﷺ was a teacher, a guide for mankind. So in other words, people were under his protection. And similarly, somebody who's looking after an orphan is doing the same thing. He's guiding, he's teaching, or she's teaching, or she's guiding this child, giving them a stable kind of upbringing and teaching them from right from wrong. So that is there. There was a companion where he complained to the Prophet. He said, I have hardness of heart. I have a hard heart. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, the way to soften the heart, the way to deal with this hard heart is to pat the heads of the orphans and to feed the poor. So this was a way of softening the heart. And so if you look at all the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, they all indicate extra kindness, extra love, extra affection for the orphan, because the orphan's already suffered a great loss. Anyone who's lost a parent will know what void it leaves in your life. So can you imagine losing your parent when you're just a child? To lose that protection and that biological love that's going to be there, that's a huge loss for somebody. And so these people deserve our extra kindness, extra affection, extra love, and therefore we have to look after them. And mistreating them is also in turn a great sin. It's actually one of the sins. You have minor sins and major sins, and then even in the major sins there's ones that are really, really bad, and from them there's seven major sins that all scholars agree upon. One of them is devouring the wealth of an orphan. In other words, these people are vulnerable, their protector's not there, so if you come in and take advantage of them, mistreat them, abuse them, then this is going to be a huge sin. And the Quran as well, and if you look at Surah Nisa, just the second verse, it talks about the same thing of taking the wealth of an orphan and using it inappropriately. So these people are vulnerable, and anyone in a vulnerable situation can be taken advantage of, can be abused, can be manipulated, and we don't have to go very far. If we look at the stuff that we've been seeing in the news for a regular basis, to terms with grooming, if you look at a lot of the victims, they targeted people who were in care, because these were vulnerable people looking for attention, looking for love, and they manipulated that, they used that against them. So if you can play a role in that person's life and you can strengthen that person and potentially stop that person from being manipulated, being led astray, being taken advantage of, the way I look at it is that you've saved a life. Because a lot of the times in charity dinners we're told, we're shown a picture of a child abroad and it melts your heart and you think, well, I need to save this person. They say you need to save lives. Yes, this person might not starve to death here, but a life in crime, a life in substance abuse, going down a very unsavory route in life, if you can stop someone doing that, that in essence is saving somebody. You actually saved a life there. So I think the whole notion of how we think about saving lives, we have to kind of concentrate on how we can do that in our own communities as well, and not just abroad. I know the Muslim community is very charitable, and we, a lot of us probably are sponsoring orphans abroad. A lot of the charities do that, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept that from everyone. But we should also think about those children in our own communities that also are in need of our help. So in that sense, by safeguarding that person, giving that person a better start in life, it's actually an act of sadaqah, because everything that you do for that person, you're not being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not put that responsibility on your shoulders, but you've taken it upon yourself, and then you've taught that person, you've helped that person in life, teach them good things, teach them the pitfalls of life. Everything that they become after that in their lives, due to your input, you're going to have a certain part of that reward for the rest of their life. So it's a massive thing. You can actually help shape somebody's life. And this hadith I came across, which I'm going to share because we don't often hear it. We always hear the one about the being with the Prophet in paradise and so on. But this one is in Ibn Majah, and it says, the best Muslim home is one which has an orphan who is being looked after well. And then the worst Muslim home is the one which an orphan who has an orphan who is being mistreated and harmed. SubhanAllah. So having an orphan, having someone in need in your home is actually a source of barakah, it's a source of goodness. Now, when it comes to our area of what's called hadana, custody in Islamic law, similar to what when I was listening to Joanne, it's very similar in the sense that it starts with the closest relatives. So if the child's very young, it goes to the closest relatives to the mother, like her mother, and then it's the maternal grandmother, then the paternal grandmother, and so on, sisters, and it keeps going. There's a whole system. I don't want to go into it because we don't have time. But then what happens is it keeps going until there's nobody left. And when it's nobody left, it then becomes the community's responsibility. And if the community does not fulfill that duty, then it's a sin on everyone. Everyone's liable for that. Everyone's responsible for that. So there should be never a situation where a Muslim child does not go into a Muslim home, right? So if Muslim children have to go into non-Muslim homes, that's a failing of our community. We're not living up to just the basic responsibility that we should have.